Welcome back. You're watching AM this morning. Great to have your company. It is 18 away from 7. Rob Campbell is gone burger, fired from Health New Zealand's chairman role after meddling in politics one too many times. Yesterday, AM revealed his Three Waters tirade was the second offence for which he had been told off by government ministers, and now he's gone. National Party leader Christopher Luxon's here this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good, bad, indifferent? How do you feel?
Oh, look, I mean, the situation's untenable, really, and so I think it's a decision for the Minister and the Prime Minister, but it's a similar, it's a breach of the Code of Conduct, and it's pretty straightforward.
Did he text you?
No, he actually called me. We had a short conversation. He personally apologised. I said thank you for the call. Suggested that he should stay focused on improving health outcomes for New Zealanders, which have all gone backwards. And that was a very short call. So I appreciated the personal.
So he said, "I'm sorry for what I said."
He said, "I'm sorry for causing offence and for apologies for what I said." And I said, "Look, I appreciate the call. Really, we should focus on outcomes for New Zealanders."
And that was basically it.
Pretty short call.
He didn't say, "I think you're wrong on co-governance again"?
No, we didn't get into any of that. No, not at all.
All right. He says that you're dog whistling. This is what this is all about.
No.
Three Waters. You're dog whistling to racist people.
What this is really about is actually how do we get the right level of water infrastructure in place in New Zealand and do so in a way that is financially sustainable so that future generations actually aren't being lumbered with these big costs and we don't get the services we deserve. So how do we get really good water quality standards and how do we get the right investment over the next 30 years? And that's a problem that New Zealand's had for some time and we need to fix it properly.
Yeah, it's not something that your solution actually fixes though, right? You've basically said to councils, do something by 2025 or we might do something, not quite sure what that is yet.
No, what we've really solved for here is we're making sure that we're going to scrap the Three Waters legislation in those 4 big mega entities. That's job number 1. Job number 2 is to return the assets to local control and ownership.
Yep. No, I get that.
But the bit that
the big thing is the financing. The biggest thing with this whole issue has been the financing.
Yeah.
How do councils actually pay for this very expensive stuff?
And that is exactly the issue that has been in New Zealand for a long time and we've fixed or solving with our proposal.
Okay, so
what we want to do is we want councils to be able to access what's called long-term debt funding. And the reason is that they actually are going to be paying for these assets a little bit every year over time, and these assets last typically 30 to 50 years. It's no different, say, for you trying to buy a house and you decide I'm going to pay it out of my cash reserves this year. Well, you can't do it and you never invest appropriately to get a quality asset. What we're saying is let's give councils access to long-term debt funding, like a 30-year mortgage, so they can actually pay for a 30-year house that they're going to be in. And that's what we know. If councils can get access to that funding, they can actually fund the future investment.
So why
that we
can't
need
they
over
do
the next
that
30 years.
now?
Because it's actually a lot of the water assets are embedded in the local councils, and councils have what we call debt limits.
Yes.
And the great thing is that having talked to many councils and mayors over the last 2 years, they've proposed solutions. For example, in the Hawke's Bay.
Yeah.
Those 4 district councils, Wairoa, Hawke's Bay, Napier, Central Hawke's Bay, have voluntarily said we want to come together, keep the assets in local control, form a regional council-controlled organisation, manage those assets jointly, and that entity could now go off and borrow money
so on
and
their
pay
own,
consistently over time to actually
just so we're
get
clear for people, on their own, councils wouldn't be able to go out and borrow the money that they need to invest in the water infrastructure to keep it up to 21st century standards. Right? They're going to need to join together to do it. And the problem with your plan is that you're not forcing them to do this. They could have done this already, couldn't they?
There's 2 ways through it. One is that the councils, when they came back with their very thoughtful proposals to Nanaia Mahuta in September last year, many of them actually proposed, look, there are neighbouring councils, it makes sense for us to come together to join these assets.
But what about those who've got the worst infrastructure?
Correct.
Who's going to partner with them?
Yep, so there's...
You don't want to carpool with the guy who's driving a Lada, do you?
No, but I hear the argument and I understand it well. The issue is that actually then each individual CCO or regional council controlled organisation, there are ways in which you can have differential pricing. If one of the councils, for example, has poor assets and is trying to come into that grouping, there are ways in which you can structure the shareholding and ways.
So how expensive is that going to be for those ratepayers to fork out for?
Well, that's going to be up for each local, council-controlled organisation. In this case,
okay. So here's your problem again, because Neil Holdham, the New Plymouth Mayor, has said the problem with politicians, local politicians, and he's one of them, is that no one is willing to increase rates or put expenses on their ratepayers because they won't get re-elected. So if you're saying to them, well, you come from a poor infrastructure area, you're going to have to pay more for your water, They're not going to go for it, are they?
No, look, there are major incentives for actually councils collaborating together so they can access that long-term debt funding.
Yeah, but not if it means paying more, ratepayers paying more for water.
Right, but the ratepayers won't pay more for water, because what we're saying is we want to take water services and ring-fence them. That's been the problem here in New Zealand, is that actually ratepayers get hit with a water treatment cost, and they end up actually having to pay that out of short-term reserves.
Okay, so let's be clear. So you're saying some bills are going to be higher than others. Different regions are going to have a higher bills to fix the water infrastructure because some have looked after them better than others, right? So what happens to those areas, those councils that have got really poor infrastructure? You're saying that they're going to join up to this group with their buddies and not going to have to pay any more for the fact that they have terrible infrastructure that needs fixing.
Yeah, so that's the same, that's called cross-subsidisation, and that's the issue that we're trying to solve for, which is essentially councils can choose to come together voluntarily and form council-controlled organisations to access long-term debt.
But why would they?
Yes, but many of them, because the access of long-term debt means that they can make consistent investments in those assets in that local region. Then what you've got is other scenarios where there will be councils that actually have managed their assets poorly, and actually in terms of them coming into those CCOs, they'll need to work out the pricing. There's no reason why you can't have differential pricing within 4 district councils if you feel one council's actually not coming with good assets.
So differential pricing means some councils pay more than others.
You might have to have people within a particular council that hasn't managed its assets well, having a slightly higher charge.
Right, which would mean a more expensive cost for ratepayers, wouldn't it?
It would mean that they might pay slightly more, for example, if their council hasn't actually delivered or managed their assets.
But you do realise you're now saying the opposite of what you just said.
No. The reality is what we're doing here is making sure that councils can get access to long-term debt funding and financing. Councils are voluntarily choosing they want to work in many cases in this way. There are big incentives for councils to come together, even councils that have difficult assets or haven't invested in assets. And from a central government point of view, we've got transitional funding to make sure that we can incent some of that too.
All right, I'm sorry, we have to leave it there because we are out of time. Chris Luxon, the National Party leader, with us this morning, 11 minutes away from 7 o'clock.